What happens when two of late-night television's biggest names go head-to-head in what was supposed to be a friendly interview, but turns into an absolute disaster that has everyone talking? Tonight, we're diving deep into the explosive confrontation between Seth Myers and Jimmy Kimmel that nobody saw coming. This isn't just some manufactured drama for clicks. This is real tension that's been building behind the scenes for months, and it all came crashing down in the most spectacular way possible. Before we get into all the shocking details, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're definitely going to want to share your thoughts on this one. The whole situation started innocently enough. Seth Myers was scheduled to appear on Jimmy Kimmel Live as part of his promotional tour for his latest late-night special. The two hosts had crossed paths countless times at industry events, award shows, and network meetings. But there had always been this underlying tension that most people in the business knew about but never talked about publicly. You see, both comedians came up through Saturday Night Live, both landed coveted late-night spots, and both had been quietly competing for the same audience demographic for years. When Seth walked onto Jimmy's set that Tuesday evening, the audience was expecting the usual late-night banter, some jokes about current events, maybe a funny story or two about life behind the scenes at NBC. What they got instead was a masterclass in how professional relationships can explode when egos clash and old grudges resurface at the worst possible moment. Jimmy started the interview with what seemed like typical host behavior, making jokes about Seth's appearance, commenting on his suit, the usual stuff that's supposed to put guests at ease and get some laughs from the studio audience. But anyone paying close attention could see that his comments had a sharper edge than usual. There was something almost predatory in the way Jimmy was circling around Seth, like he was setting up for something bigger. "So Seth," Jimmy said with that trademark grin that suddenly seemed less charming and more calculated, "I have to ask about the ratings. I mean, we all know late night is a tough business, and some shows are doing better than others. How are you handling the pressure of, well, let's call it the changing landscape?" The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Everyone in the studio could feel the shift in energy. This wasn't friendly late-night host banter anymore. This was Jimmy taking a direct shot at Seth's show performance, and he was doing it in front of a live studio audience and millions of viewers at home. Seth's smile tightened almost imperceptibly, but he maintained his composure. "You know, Jimmy, I think every host faces challenges, and we all find our own ways to connect with our audience. Some of us focus on comedy, some focus on viral moments, and some," he paused meaningfully, "focus on whatever gets the most clicks, regardless of quality." The studio audience wasn't sure whether to laugh or gasp. Seth had just fired back, and hard. He was essentially calling out Jimmy's approach to comedy as cheap and click-driven, questioning the very foundation of what had made Jimmy successful in recent years. Jimmy's expression shifted for just a moment, a flash of genuine anger crossing his face before he recovered with another one of those calculated smiles. "That's interesting coming from someone whose biggest viral moment was getting emotional about politics. I mean, we've all cried on television, Seth, but most of us save it for the really important stuff." This was a direct reference to one of Seth's most personal and powerful segments, where he had gotten visibly emotional while discussing a particularly tragic news event. It had been a moment of genuine humanity that resonated with millions of viewers, but Jimmy was now weaponizing it, turning Seth's authenticity into ammunition for his attack. The audience was completely silent now. This had gone way beyond playful. Ribbing between colleagues, this was personal, and everyone could feel it. Seth's jaw clenched, and for the first time since the interview started, his media-trained composure began to crack. "You want to talk about authentic moments, Jimmy?" Seth's voice was steady, but there was steel underneath it. "Let's talk about the difference between showing genuine emotion about real-world tragedy and manufacturing fake outrage for social media. Engagement. Some of us actually care about the stories we're telling." Jimmy leaned back in his chair, and there was something almost triumphant in his expression, like he had been waiting for this exact moment. "Oh, so now we're the authenticity police. That's rich coming from someone who built his entire career on being the safe choice, the network-approved option, the comedian who never takes any real risks." The insult landed like a physical blow. Jimmy wasn't just attacking Seth's ratings or his emotional moments anymore. He was attacking the very core of who Seth was as a performer, suggesting that he was nothing more than a corporate puppet, a sanitized version of what a late-night host should be. Seth stood up from the guest chair so quickly that it startled everyone in the studio. His face was flushed with anger, and his hands were visibly shaking. "You know what, Jimmy? I came here tonight thinking we were both professionals who could have a conversation about our work without turning it into some kind of high school popularity contest. But clearly, I was wrong about your character." The words, "your character," hit Jimmy like a slap. In the entertainment industry, questioning someone's character isn't just an insult, it's a fundamental attack on their reputation and integrity. Seth wasn't just angry anymore, he was done with the entire situation. Jimmy's face went through a series of expressions in rapid succession. First confusion, then realization of what Seth had just accused him of, then something that looked almost like panic. But instead of backing down or trying to de-escalate the situation like a reasonable person would, Jimmy doubled down in the worst possible way. "Character? You want to lecture me about character?" Jimmy's voice was rising now, his famous composure completely abandoned. It's coming from the guy who spent years kissing up to Lorne Michaels just to get a show, then spent even more years playing it safe so NBC wouldn't cancel him. At least I'm honest about what I do. I don't pretend to be some kind of moral authority while hiding behind corporate-approved talking points. The studio audience was frozen. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a genuine professional relationship imploding in real time. Camera operators were looking at each other uncertainly, not sure if they should keep rolling or cut to commercial. The producers in the booth were probably having heart attacks trying to figure out how to handle this situation. Seth took a deep breath, and for a moment it looked like he might try to salvage the situation. Maybe walk back his comment and attempt some kind of professional recovery. But then Jimmy made the mistake that would push this confrontation past the point of no return. "You know what, Seth? Maybe this is exactly what your show needs. Some real drama, some actual conflict, instead of that sanitized, focus-grouped nonsense. You usually serve up, maybe walking off my set will finally give you something interesting to talk about on Monday night." That last comment was the breaking point. Jimmy wasn't just attacking Seth personally anymore. He was actively trying to manipulate the situation for his own benefit, suggesting that this entire confrontation was somehow good for Seth's career, while simultaneously insulting everything Seth had built. It was manipulative, condescending, and completely unprofessional. Seth's response was measured but deadly. "You think this is content, Jimmy? You think destroying professional relationships and ambushing colleagues is entertainment? This is exactly what's wrong with your approach to comedy. Everything is just material to you, even other people's dignity." "Oh, please," Jimmy shot back, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Don't act like you're above it all. We both know you'd kill for my ratings, my viral moments, my social media engagement. The only difference is, I'm honest about playing the game while you pretend you're somehow better than the rest of us." The accusation that Seth was jealous of Jimmy's success was particularly brutal because it hit on every insecurity that performers in their position deal with. Late-night television is an incredibly competitive landscape where ratings, social media buzz, and cultural relevance are constantly being measured. Jimmy was essentially saying that Seth's moral stance was just a cover for professional envy. Seth was quiet for a long moment, and everyone in the studio held their breath. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, but there was something final about it, like a door closing permanently. "You know what, Jimmy? You're absolutely right about one thing. This conversation is definitely going to be memorable, but not for the reasons you think." Seth turned toward the studio audience, his demeanor completely changing from angry to almost sad. "I apologize to everyone who came here tonight expecting to see two comedians having a fun conversation. You deserve better than this." Jimmy realized too late that he had pushed things too far. There was genuine panic in his eyes now as he seemed to understand that Seth was about to do something that would make this situation much worse for Jimmy than it was for Seth. "Hey, come on, Seth. We're just having a conversation here. Don't be so sensitive." The word sensitive was like throwing gasoline on a fire. It was dismissive, condescending, and it completely invalidated everything Seth had been trying to express. About professional respect and basic human decency, Jimmy was essentially telling Seth that his legitimate concerns about being ambushed and insulted on television were just sensitive. Seth's voice was dangerously quiet now. Jimmy, I've been in this business long enough to know the difference between comedy and cruelty, between entertainment and exploitation. What you're doing right now isn't funny, it's not entertaining, and it's certainly not professional. It's just mean the studio was so quiet you could hear people breathing. Seth's accusation that Jimmy was being mean, not funny, cut right to the heart of every comedian's worst fear. In comedy, being unfunny is bad, but being mean-spirited while trying to be funny is career-ending. Seth was essentially saying that Jimmy had crossed the line from entertainer to bully. Jimmy tried one last desperate attempt to regain control of the situation. Look, Seth, this is live television. Things get heated sometimes. Why don't we take a breath and start over? We're both professionals here. But it was too late for professional courtesy. Seth had already made his decision, and everyone could see it in his body language. He was done with this interview, done with Jimmy's behavior, and done pretending that any of this was acceptable. You're right, Jimmy. We are both professionals. Or at least, one of us is. Seth began removing his microphone, his movements deliberate and final. A real professional doesn't ambush their guests, doesn't turn interviews into personal attacks, and doesn't try to humiliate colleagues for entertainment. Value. The microphone removal was symbolic and devastating. In television, taking off your mic means you're done talking, done participating, done with the entire situation. It's the equivalent of hanging up the phone, but much more dramatic and public. Jimmy's face went pale as he realized that Seth was actually going to walk out and that this entire disaster was being broadcast live to millions of people. This wasn't just a bad interview anymore. This was going to be a defining moment in both of their careers, and Jimmy was clearly going to come out looking like the villain. Jimmy made one final, desperate attempt to salvage the situation, but it only made everything worse. Seth, come on, don't make this bigger than it needs to be. We're comedians. We bust each other's chops. That's what we do. Don't walk away from this. The pleading tone in Jimmy's voice was almost pathetic, and it revealed something that everyone watching had probably suspected but never seen confirmed. Behind all the bravado and aggressive humor, Jimmy was fundamentally insecure about his own position in the comedy world, and he needed Seth to stay and participate in this train wreck, because without Seth's participation, Jimmy just looked like a bully talking to himself. Seth paused at Jimmy's words, and for a moment it seemed like he might reconsider. But then he turned back toward Jimmy with an expression that was equal parts disappointment and resolve. You know what, Jimmy? You're absolutely right. Comedians do bust each other's chops. Good comedians punch up. They challenge power. They make fun of people who can handle it and who are in on the joke. They don't punch down. They don't ambush people who came here in good faith. And they don't mistake cruelty for comedy. This distinction between punching up and punching down was devastating because it highlighted exactly what Jimmy had been doing wrong. In comedy, there are unwritten rules about who you can target and how you can target them. Punching down means attacking someone who has less power than you, or attacking someone who isn't prepared to defend themselves. Seth was essentially accusing Jimmy of being a comedy amateur who didn't understand the basic ethics of their profession. The studio audience was completely silent, but you could sense that their sympathy was entirely with Seth. He had come across as reasonable, dignified, and professional throughout this entire disaster, while Jimmy had revealed himself to be petty, insecure, and genuinely mean-spirited. This wasn't going to be one of those situations where both parties shared the blame equally. Jimmy's response showed just how badly he had misread the entire situation. Oh, so now you're going to lecture me about comedy? That's rich coming from someone whose idea of edgy humor is making fun of politicians everyone already hates. At least I take risks. This comment revealed so much about Jimmy's mindset and why this confrontation had happened in the first place. He genuinely believed that being cruel to guests, that ambushing colleagues, that turning interviews into personal attacks was somehow brave or risky. He had completely lost sight of what real comedy was supposed to accomplish. Seth's final response was delivered with the kind of quiet authority that comes from someone who knows they're absolutely in the right. "Jimmy, there's nothing risky about bullying people who can't fight back. There's nothing brave about using your platform to humiliate guests who trusted you enough to come on your show. And there's definitely nothing funny about what you've done here tonight." Those words hung in the air like a verdict. Seth had just delivered a masterclass in how to maintain dignity under pressure, while completely dismantling his opponent's credibility. He hadn't raised his voice, he hadn't resorted to personal insults, and he hadn't lost his composure. He had simply stated the truth about Jimmy's behavior. And the truth was devastating. Seth began walking toward the edge of the stage, and Jimmy made one last panicked attempt to stop him. "Seth, wait, this is live television. You can't just walk out on a live show. Think about your reputation. Think about what this looks like." The irony of Jimmy suddenly caring about Seth's reputation after spending the entire interview trying to destroy it was not lost on anyone watching, but Seth's response showed that he had thought this through completely and was prepared for exactly this kind of manipulation. "My reputation." Seth stopped walking but didn't turn around. "Jimmy, my reputation is based on treating people with respect, telling the truth, and using comedy to make the world a little bit better instead of a little bit meaner. Walking away from this disaster is probably the best thing I've ever done for my reputation." And with that, Seth Myers walked off Jimmy Kimmel's stage, leaving Jimmy sitting alone with a studio full of shocked audience members and millions of viewers who had just witnessed one of the most spectacular implosions in late-night television. History.Jimmy tried to recover, attempting some kind of closing monologue to the audience, but the damage was done. He had revealed himself to be petty, cruel, and fundamentally unprofessional. While Seth had demonstrated exactly what integrity looked like under pressure, the contrast couldn't have been more stark or more damaging to Jimmy's carefully crafted public image. The cameras kept rolling as Seth disappeared backstage, and Jimmy was left to face the aftermath of his own behavior. The silence in the studio was deafening, and even Jimmy seemed to understand that he had just made a catastrophic mistake that was going to follow him for the rest of his career. What made this confrontation so powerful wasn't just the drama of someone walking off a live television show. It was the way it revealed the fundamental difference between two approaches to comedy and two approaches to treating other people. Seth had shown that you could be successful in entertainment without sacrificing your integrity, while Jimmy had demonstrated that all the ratings and viral moments in the world couldn't make up for a lack of basic human decency. The whole situation lasted less than 15 minutes, but it was 15 minutes that changed how people saw both comedians forever. Seth's walk-off wasn't just a dramatic television moment, it was a statement about what comedy should be and how entertainers should treat each other and their audiences. So what do you think about this whole situation? Was Seth right to walk off, or should he have stayed and tried to work things out? Drop a comment below with your thoughts, and make sure you subscribe for more deep dives into the moments that shaped entertainment history. This kind of behind the scenes drama reveals so much about the real personalities behind our favorite shows, and there are definitely more stories like this that deserve to be told.